One of the questions I get asked a lot is, how do you make your watercolor paintings not look flat? A lot of people struggle with feeling like their watercolor paintings are really flat. So today I'm going to show you a simple way to add more depth to your watercolor paintings. So our subject today is just going to be a simple orange, and the reason I chose an orange is because it's round, it's very straightforward. I want to show you a simple way to add more depth to your watercolor paintings. So we're going to start off just with a circle, and we are going to mix up some orange paint. Now I'm going to start with a pretty light orange, and I have a size 8 brush, but use whatever brush you want. You can make this really small. My circle is probably about 4 inches by 4 inches. Now that I have this orange on my brush, it's pretty watered down, and I'm just gonna paint the circle. Now, what a lot of people do when they first start watercolor painting is they paint this circle with watercolor paint, and they just think, that's it. I painted it with watercolor. This was actually something that I struggled with when I first started painting with watercolor because I had no idea that you needed to layer. So I just thought, okay, I did it. I painted it with watercolor. It doesn't look that great. So you need to do a couple more things to add more depth to this painting. Now that we have a base layer down, we want to add more depth. This is still wet, so you could do one of two things. This depends on the kind of style you want. If you like a more loose style, then I would suggest grabbing a little bit darker orange, and you can lightly tap in the orange. Otherwise, I'm gonna show you guys how to paint layers after it dries. So make sure this layer is completely dry, and then when we come back, we are going to slowly add in more layers. Now that our first layer is down, we want to decide where our light source is coming from. As you can see, it kind of dried in the middle with like a little shine. So it did add a small portion of depth to this, but we want way more to make it more interesting. So like I was saying, if you just stop here with your watercolor painting, you're not going to be very happy with it. Of course, people paint in different styles, but for the most part, a lot of people find this to be really flat. They want to add more depth. So what we're going to do is we're going to decide on our light source. I am going to say our light source is coming from the left-hand side. That means that this is going to be lighter than this area down here. So if the sun's shining on this orange, this side is going to be a lot more shaded. So go over and grab your orange again and make it just slightly darker. So you can add a little red if you want. And what I'm going to do is just outline this edge. My paint is pretty saturated. I would say the texture of maybe melted butter or like coconut milk. Rinse off your brush, grab just water, and then just blend that in. And you're gonna wanna blend it up until I would say about right here, because remember we have that light source coming in. And in order to get rid of this edge, just clean off your brush and grab a little more water, but lightly tap it off on your paper towel and just like do a scrubbing motion. Okay, so now we have this nice dark shadow over here, and I'm actually going to add a little more color in because I really just think it could use it. Being careful to think about where the light would hit something. Now, if you're struggling to imagine where the light would be hitting, go ahead and grab an orange yourself and then like shine a light on it, and you can see how much variation there will be in the shadows. So we have to let this dry, and once it's dry, we're gonna come back and we're gonna do our next layer. All right, now that our second layer is dry, we are going to repeat that same exact thing, but we're actually going to leave a little more of this the color that it currently is. So for the most part, the color up here is totally fine. We don't want to touch that now. Now we're kind of moving into this color. We want something to be slightly darker. And again, like I said in the beginning, I'm giving you guys the most basic way to do this, just so you can improve your paintings quick. Now I have an even darker orange on my brush, and I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna outline that edge that is in the shadows. Pretty dark. Rinse off my brush, grab just water. You never want your water to be dripping off your brush. That's too much water. And then I'm just lightly blending that in. So you want it to be a smooth transition to this kind of shaded over here, this color. So I'm just lightly doing that scrubbing motion until it blends in. Of course, it's not gonna be perfect, and that's totally fine, but there we go. Now, if you would like, you can grab an even darker orange, maybe add just a like teensy bits of blue to it. And since this is wet, I'm just with the tip of my brush, just lightly touching with that dark, dark color, and it's going to create an even darker shadow. And you can make that come up a little bit. If you're looking at an orange, squint your eyes. That's really helpful to see where the shadows are. And I'm just bringing up this color a little bit further. Okay, now what we don't want to do is now go back in and add another darker color, because what's going to happen is, because this is all wet, we're going to lose a little bit of that variation that we have. So I'm going to let this dry again, and we're going to do another layer. We are back, and we are going to do our final layer on this orange. Once again, I'm grabbing an orange that is very dark. I've added a significant amount of red to it. And this time I'm actually going to add a little bit of dark brown, because I really want to get a deep shadow. Now we're not going to be adding any more color in here. I'm really happy with the way that looks, but I do want to add in color at the base. And I'm grabbing paint on my brush, just the tip of the brush, and I'm going to lightly draw a line down here, because this would be the deepest shadow. Okay, then again, same technique, rinsing off my brush, grabbing just water, and I'm just going to lightly move it around so it blends into that darker orange. And I would say I'm pretty happy with that. Another thing that you can do as well is you could add more yellow in here. Maybe just a little yellow paint. Sometimes that is a great way to add depth. Adding a color that is slightly different. I like to do this when I'm painting, let's say, a black dog. Adding in just a little blue sometimes can really elevate your painting. Okay, so I added in some yellow, and I'm happy with the way that this orange looks for the most part. Now, if we really wanted to get in depth here, I would paint how the orange has that little navel kind of coming out, or navel oranges have that, because that would make it even more realistic, and there would be more shadows around that area. Another thing is oranges have those tiny little dots. They look like pores. But I'm not too focused on making it entirely realistic. I just want to show you guys an easy way to add detail and to draw the eye into your paintings, so your paintings aren't looking flat. Now, the last thing we're going to do is we're going to add a shadow under here. Now, if you say you're creating something for a pattern, for the most part, you don't want to be adding the actual shadow. But if you are painting something that's an art print or a landscape, you do want to add shadows because it makes it look more realistic. So now we have to let this dry, and we'll add a just slight shadow down here. Our painting is nice and dry, and we want to add our shadow. Now our shadow would be probably like a grayish blue. You don't want to do black because that would just be way too dark. So grab a grayish blue that's pretty watered down, because that's how we're going to start. And again, if the light is coming in this way, then there would be a shadow this way. And the shadow would just touch here underneath and then go slightly over. And I would rinse off my brush and get just water and just lightly blend that shadow. Doesn't have to be anything super fancy. And then grab something a little bit darker and poke in the darker paint just around the base. And that is literally it. So really simple way to add a shadow and also to give your painting just a little more interest to look at. Of course, you could really knock yourself out here and just keep layering upon layering upon layering. Sometimes people ask me, you know, how do you know if you've gone too far? You have to go too far to know that you went too far. So don't be afraid of that. It's okay to mess up. It's part of the learning process. I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial. If you have any watercolor questions, please ask me. I love to answer them. And I'm gonna be doing a lot more of these educational tutorials that are short and focus on one specific technique.